Now we'll be going ahead and working with GitHub. So there are a few things I want to cover over here. So things like creating a new repository, then understanding how to commit a change, and then basically learning how to create a branch and what branches are. And finally, we'll go ahead and end by learning how to create a pull request. All right, so let us start. So the first thing over here is creating a new repository. So guys, we're gonna click on new over here. Again, you have an option to click on the plus and click on new, but we're just gonna click on new over here. Now, creating a new repository. So as I had told you guys earlier, a repository contains all the project files, including revision history, right? So basically, they're all relevant files that logically make sense, right, in one particular location. So if you're a food delivery app, then you create a food delivery repository. So now let's go ahead and create our own repository. So you can go ahead and change the owner if you have multiple accounts, and now the owner remains the same. Now repository name. So let's give it an appropriate repository name. So let me call this GitHub GL tutorial. All right, cool. So it actually checks if the GitHub repository name is available or not. If it's not available, it'll ask you to change the name. So it is available. So we're going to move on. Now this needs a description. So you can always give a description to your repository for other people to see what it is. So here I'm going to mention this is a test repository to help people understand how to use GitHub. All right. So once I've written the description, now I can move on. So after you've written the description, the next option for you to choose is whether you want your repository to be public or whether you want it to be private. Now, it is important to understand the distinction over here. So public means that anyone on the internet can see this repository, right? But you can choose, you still get to choose who commits to your repository. Whereas with private, you can choose who sees the repository and commit to the repository. So the difference here is that public means it's available for everyone to look at, but not touch. And private means that no one can look at unless you want them to look at, and still people can't touch it unless you want people to touch it. All right. So the choice here is dependent on your requirement. So if you're working for a company, it's generally going to be a private repository, right? You don't want your code to be seen by other people or other people from other companies. But if you want your code to be open source and for other people to look at and enjoy, then you can go ahead and make it public, right? So it really depends on how you want it to be. So once you've done that, you have an option to initialize this repository with a few starter things, right? So a few starter things can be adding a Readme file. So what is a Readme file? A Readme file is a very basic file that gives a good brief description of what your project does. So it's kind of like the description, but it goes a little bit more into detail. And this is a file that is a part of your code. So if anyone ever downloads or clones your repository onto their system, they'll have a Readme file, right? It's not just a metadata, it is an actual file. So I do want a Readme file so that people will be able to check out my Readme file. Now, there are a few more options. That is a .gitignore. Now, what is this file? So this file is used when you want certain things in your folder not to be considered when you're staging. So that's why I told you guys about the Git Life Cycle. So in Git Life Cycle, when you're on your laptop or on your PC and you're working in your local repository, you might have 10 files, but you only want to stage 3 files because only those 3 files are relevant. The other 10 files or the other 7 files aren't that important and don't need to be tracked. So what you can do is you can just include them in your .gitignore. So that way everything gets ignored that is inside this file when you want to stage things. All right. So right now we don't need this. Choose a license. Yeah, we can go ahead and choose a license. So licensing basically tells others what they can and they can't do with our code. So if you want people to be able to use your code for any purpose at all, just go with an MIT license. So this gives people the right to basically use your code for any purpose they see fit. This is the philosophy of open source, right? Now you can have certain changes in that. You can look through which license suits you the best. You have a lot of different license, that you can use. So MIT license even means they can use your code for commercial purposes or whatnot. Okay, so now that we're done with all of this, we can go ahead and click on create a repository. You can review it once and then click on create a repository. It will start creating the repository for you. All right, so once we have created a repository, this is what you guys are going to see. Now, this is another sort of dashboard. This is your repository dashboard, right? So it tells you everything about that repository. So you guys can see a lot of stuff over here. Let me go through all of these things one by one. We'll start off with this thing because this is the most important part. This is where all of your files are generally going to be. And we are in dark mode right now. If you guys are noticing the difference, that is because I have dark mode enabled. If you want, you can go ahead and change that to light mode, or you guys can want to change it to dark mode. Now, as you guys can see over here, we have two files, license file and read.me file, right? So readme.md file. So we can always go ahead and change the file, and you can see the readme.md file has appeared over here. So you can go ahead and make changes over here. You can add more stuff, and the description is a part of it. So I can add more stuff saying that, hey guys, hope you are having a nice day learning about GitHub. Here is a quick tip. Always give a relevant commit message. All right, so that's what I wanted. Now I can go ahead and commit the changes. Now again, guys, committing the changes means saving those changes. So this is me basically committing a new version of the readme.md file. Now I can commit directly to main branch. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll tell you guys what branches are. So just commit this. So as you guys can see, I went contrary to my tip over here. I did not give a commit message, but don't worry. The reason I didn't give it because I want to go back over here and show you how to do it, by using actual code. Okay. So you guys can see we have two files over here. Now, so what we will do now is we're going to go ahead and click on add a file and click on create new file. So you can go ahead and upload files over here. This gives you the option to click and drag and drop different files from your system onto GitHub repositories. But normally when you're working and pulling and pushing code, you just make use of Git command line interface commands. You don't use this option, basically because it's a little bit tedious and that is much more easier. But now what we're going to do is we're just working with GitHub. We're not working with Git. So I'm going to click on create a new file. Okay. So this will give me the option to add a new file over here.